Welcome. Welcome to the September 25th, 2017 regular school board meeting of the Pine-Richland School Board. We'll begin with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Ms. Williams.
Dr. Banyas.
Here.
Ms. Dawson. Here. Mr. Sundo.
Here.
Mr. Kashani.
Here.
Mr. DiTullio.
Here.
Ms. Goebel. Ms. Johnston. Mr. Lyons.
Here.
Mr. Stegman.
Here.
Thank you.
I'll begin our present statement with a moment of silence. On behalf of the Pine-Richland School District family, we would like to take a moment of silence in remembrance of former high school mathematics teacher George R. Murphy, who passed away on September 17, 2017. After 40 years of teaching at the high school, he decided to retire in 1996. Mr. Murphy was also a veteran of the United States Air Force. Our condolences and thoughts are with George's family and friends at this time. Please join us for a moment of silence in his remembrance. Thank you. The board met in executive session prior to the voting meeting to discuss a personnel matter. Move on to item 1.02, recognition of visitors. Anybody wishes to approach the board, please do so.
Okay.
Please tell us your name, where you're from, and try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. Use the microphone, please, so we can hear you better.
Good evening. My name is Mary Sullivan. I'm here this evening to ask the school board to please write into policy support for select yearbook students to attend a yearly training at a college recommended course by the yearbook teacher, Mrs. Harshman. I'm asking for the school board to write policy that would financially support 4 students identified by the yearbook teacher to attend a summer college course at Slippery Rock University. This training would allow education in yearbook theme, yearbook layout, yearbook design, and writing in preparation for the fall deadlines, which are due by October 31st of our current school year. These yearbook training opportunities would be paid for by the Pine-Richland school system. It would not be a requirement, but an opportunity that would be presented with great benefit to the annual Pine-Richland yearbook. This short training is an educational course that many other school systems in our area attend. Examples of school systems in our area that attend this course, supported by the revenue they make in yearbook sales and ads, include Shaler High School, Kiski High School, and North Allegheny High School. In the past, the Pine-Richland school system paid for the entire yearbook staff to attend this course. I'm not asking for the entire staff to attend, but support for 4 students to attend. The benefit of team building, so the essential yearbook staff are prepared and dedicated to their mission at the beginning of the year, would definitely benefit the production of the Pine-Richland yearbook, including the revenue it generates. I have met with high school principal Nancy Bowman and Assistant Superintendent Dr. Pasquinelli regarding my request. Repeatedly, I've been told the reason they cannot support my request is because saying yes would result in all summer school programs wanting support. I believe in our current climate that fear is not a good reason to base our decisions. I believe that this request is different than other school requests and can easily be separated. There are no other school programs within the district whose efforts and work benefit the entire school system. The yearbook includes every person in the high school. No other activity, sport, art, or extracurricular program can say the same. I suggest that the policy identifies the support of our school board because the yearbook is the only approved classroom course that includes the entire student body of Pine-Richland. In closing, I'm asking for support for the commuter course at Slippery Rock University, which is $150 per person for a total amount of $600. This would help 4 students, ideally editors and future senior yearbook staff, be prepared to start out the year with theme ideas and layout already prepared, which would greatly help the yearbook staff be ready at the beginning of the school year, so that actual copy and content can be worked on instead of taking months in the beginning of the school year to set up the theme and the cover. The Pine-Richland yearbook has been published since 1958. Let's put this request into action in anticipation of the 60-year anniversary of the Pine-Richland yearbook. I greatly appreciate your time and consideration in this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Anybody else wish to approach the board, please? Thank you. We'll move on to item 1.03, student and staff recognition. I suppose I'll hand this one to Ms. Hathorn.
Thank you. Tonight, we're going to start with student recognition. The National Merit Scholarship Corporation named 5 Pine-Richland High School seniors as semifinalists. They include Ryan Ahern, Chelsea Carver, Nathan Chang, Bruce Gia, Mahek Sethi, and these seniors are among 16,000 across the U.S. being named semifinalists in the 2018 program, and later on we'll have more details about commended and whether those students have gone on to finalist status. Also wanted to mention golf coach Jeff Seibert says that for the first time 6 Pine-Richland High School boys golfers will advance to the WPIALs tomorrow. Advancing are sophomore Donnie Professori, senior Jack Kramer, and juniors Nick Casario, Jake Weimard, Rico Scholi, and Jacob Anderson. Also, junior Lauren Freivogel will also represent PR at the PIAO Championships on October 4th, and she took second at the qualifier, so congratulations to those students. Okay, break out your Hawaiian shirts. Pine-Richland is inviting the community to the 2017 Hawaiian Homecoming on October 6th. A procession including the marching band, auxiliaries, ROTC cadets, and homecoming court will make its way in front of the high school starting at 6:30. Also, you can enjoy delicious food and spirit wear booths being hosted by our booster and other school groups. At 7:30, the Rams will take on Peters Township, and for another exciting football game, we encourage the whole community to come out for this spectacular evening. Now I'd like to turn your attention to retiree recognition. Pine-Richland School District would like to take time to honor one of our go-to employees. When anyone had a question about heating, cooling, they would go to Mr. Ron Kleber. This maintenance employee has logged 14 years of service with the district. He's helped redesign the heating and cooling system in the new STEAM edition at the high school. Mr. Kleber has worked in Keebler has worked in the HVAC and refrigeration industry, but he says Pine-Richland has been the best place to work because of the people he met along the way. So tonight we want to say a big thank you to Ron for 14 years of service to the district. Now he says he plans to tinker in retirement, possibly opening a sheet metal shop. Now that sounds like a big endeavor to me. But Ron, we have a small token of our appreciation for you. It can't make up for all that you've done, but we want to thank you, and you've brought your family along, so why don't you come over and maybe introduce them.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, that's my regret is have to retire. The best place I ever worked in my life. The people were tremendous. I don't know if you've seen the letter I put out to the people that really helped me in January when I was at my lowest. But I was able to kick the cancer. Now I'm just surviving the aftermath, which is tougher, I think tougher than the cancer itself. But all in all, the hard part is leaving the good people to work with. And I say it's been the best place I've ever worked in my life. Thank you.
Dr. Miller.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Best wishes.
Thank you. Finally, I want to say thank you to teacher Diane Dorier. After 20 years, she is retiring. She first began teaching middle school science and then moved on to the high school, teaching honors and academic biology. She could not be here tonight, but we wish her well as she spends more time with her children and grandchildren. So thank you to her and also Ron, and it's nice to see your family here to celebrate.
And it's okay if you want to leave. You don't have to hang around for the meeting.
We all want to leave, but you actually can leave. Thank you, guys.
It's a grandson there, he's 25, it's kind of hard to keep him safe. Let's go. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Okay. I'll move on to item 1.04, correspondence. Ms. Williams.
Thank you. Mary Sullivan contacted the board requesting the opportunity to address the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1.05, minutes for approval. Recommended action is the motion to approve the meeting minutes as attached to Buildings and Grounds and Planning meetings.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Strategic plan update, Pine-Richland School District Teacher Academy.
Thank you. Prior to this meeting, we had a staff services committee meeting in which we went through a number of the strategic initiatives that were occurring in the HR department. One of those being the Pine-Richland School District Teacher Academy. What the Teacher Academy is and what we've been working on over the last 6 months is really a replacement of the prior Pine-Richland School District induction program. So what are induction programs? Pennsylvania School Code requires that every school district provide new teachers coming into the districts with an induction program. The purpose of that program is to, number one, give them an overview and idea of the school district in which they are about to work. It requires us, it gives us the opportunity to talk about our mission, vision, values, the culture of Pine-Richland School District, but as well as provide professional development for those new teachers coming into Pine-Richland that will make them have a smoother transition into the district, provide them with tools that will allow them to be more successful in the classroom, and provide them with resources that will allow them to work with mentor teachers, which is a component and requirement of the induction programs, that will allow them to have that resource through a mentor to ease their transition into Pine-Richland. The issue of our induction program has been an area of needed improvement for a number of years now. Over the last 6 months, we have worked with administration as well as the teachers to identify and develop the new, what is now being identified as the Pine-Richland Academy. Although the induction program, number one, is a component that is needed for compliance, not only just to, as you would say, check the box that an employee received an induction program, which they need in order to transfer their certification from level 1 to level 2. What we have done is to make sure that through the Pine-Richland Academy, all new professional employees will run through the academy, regardless of the new employees. If they're coming right out of college, whether they've been teaching in another district for 5 or more years, they will also go through this Pine-Richland Academy. The whole purpose for that is, and our belief is that regardless of whether you have teaching experience in another district, every single district has a different and varied culture, has different systems, has different curriculum, have different goals and objectives that need to be met. And our purpose of this Pine-Richland Academy is to make sure that those new teachers coming into our district, experienced or not, has the tools to be able to be as successful in the classroom as possible. One element and component of the Pine-Richland Academy that was new this year as well was a mentor training. Our old induction program did have mentors identified, but we had not previously trained those mentors to give them the tools that would be and expectations that are required of the mentor to help the mentee through this process. So earlier this year, during our orientation day, we were able to meet for about an hour, hour and a half with our mentors to give them the resources that are aligned to the Pine-Richland Academy, to identify specific areas of competencies that they need to review and go over with their mentees, and to provide them district resources that they will have at their fingertips to be able to help address any concerns that a new employee may have. The training was very positive, well received by the faculty and staff, and we have seen positive feedback from that process. So we think that is an improvement in the system and being able to develop those mentors so they are that resource for our new hires. We will be having, with this Pine-Richland Academy, quarterly meetings. Our first quarterly meeting is coming up in the next couple of weeks. What we will do is identify competencies in each of the quarters. Our first quarter is around the issue of curriculum. So we will have competencies that make sure that the new hires know how to navigate the curriculum, that they understand how it has been developed, that they have specific course information and understand how to access those resources. We will also look at that for specially designed instruction and gifted education as well, to make sure that they're reaching all learners across that curriculum. We would also have building level goals and competencies, really about, again, the building level, we're looking at the more nuts and bolts of what a teacher needs to know. So we're talking about what happens on open house and curriculum nights. When does the teacher need to be there? What is the expectation on those evenings? And how do those roll out? Report cards are coming right around the corner for that first 9 weeks. We want to make sure that the mentors and principals have walked through with the new hires how that report card is completed, and to make sure that the information is in the system appropriately. So we've really worked to get this into a much more systematic process, and we want to make sure that we are getting this feedback and continued refinement of the process in real time over the course of this year, so that not only do we have these improvements that we've implemented this year, but that we're continuing to modify and revise and continue to grow and improve that program going into future school years. So the program itself has taken a big step forward from an induction compliance perspective, not only from compliance, but also the fact that the Pine-Richland Academy is addressing a need not of just a new teacher coming out of college, but all new employees, to make sure that they are as successful as possible and receive the best foot forward moving into the classroom as they enter into Pine-Richland School District. Any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Move on to Finance. Mr. Sundo.
Item 3.01, motion to approve the financial reports dated September 25th, 2017, and accounts payable dated September 25th, 2017, in the amount of $926,511.46, and paid accounts for August and September in the amount of $18,155,106.29 as listed.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 3.02 is an informational item. There are no budget transfers pursuant to PA School Code. They're not permitted until October 1st. Item 3.03, the administration would like to schedule a Finance Committee meeting on December 11th, 2017 to review the audited financial statements, receive a bond market update, and discussion on the 2018-2019 general fund budget. Being that by that time the board and committees will be reshuffled, probably no reason not to put it on the calendar. Finally, 3.04, another information item. A reminder, a joint Finance, Building and Grounds Committee meeting has been scheduled for November 13th, 2017 at 6 p.m. Tentative topics to be discussed include capital funding, project update, and print and copy services.
Any questions on finance? Thank you, Mr. Sundo.
You're welcome.
Academic achievement, Ms. Dawson.
Item 4.01 is a motion to approve the purchase of Amplify Science units for grades 6 through 8 for 2017-18 school year in the amount of $3,500.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Dr. Pasquale, can you just provide some insight as to the rationale that went into the selection of the units?
Absolutely. We've been working with the 6th and 8th grade teachers for pretty much over the summer is when we started. So what we asked them to do is to review their current curriculum and then look at there's a total of 8 different units that they had to select from. They looked for the unit or units that most tightly aligned to our curriculum, that had a span of time that they felt that they could integrate into our current curriculum without having to pull too much from what they already do. So it was really a team effort to make the recommendation from the 6th grade teachers and the 8th grade teachers.
The only minor concern I have is the selection of the climate change subject versus the other environmental science unit offered may be based on less settled science than the other unit. So I'd be curious ultimately to see how that plays out and the impact that it has.
Okay.
Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Item 4.02 is a reminder for a joint academic achievement operational service committee meeting on October 23rd at 6 p.m. for topics technology, professional development, food service, and transportation. Item 4.03 is another reminder of an academic achievement committee meeting on November 20th at 6 p.m. for the annual growth academic report.
Any further questions on academic achievement? Thank you, Ms. Dawson. Buildings and grounds, Mr. DiTullio.
Item 5.01, it's a motion to approve the recommendation of the Buildings and Grounds Committee to accept bids and award contracts in the amount of $1,249,780 for the athletic facilities improvements project as attached. And
Second.
It's extensive, so.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I have 3 concerns with this proposal. The first is that the bundle is over budget. Second, it was really the only single variation of or proposal offered versus other potential combinations of projects that could be accomplished potentially under budget. And third is that it's asking to take money from the infrastructure bucket, so to speak, to pay for extracurriculars. I think this sets 3 unwise precedents, and therefore I'd ask that, or move that this item be sent back to committee for further review.
Do we have a second on that motion? Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'll add, I think, and really, just for the sake of the record, because I think most of the board members here were at that committee meeting where we batted this around fairly extensively. And we have a fairly developed capital plan that's part of our strategic plan to reorganize and to plan our capital spending investment in the school's infrastructure in a more rational and deliberate manner. And that involved reaching out and doing a full analysis of our facilities. You're absolutely right, Steve. These are extracurriculars, but they do fit into our full strategic plan, which is to address the needs of the entire student, right, inside and outside of the classroom. The estimate, and they were just estimates, the estimated costs for these particular projects were below what we got in quotes. Now that it's going to happen quite a lot throughout our capital planning process. We get estimates based on skilled experience in the industry from architects. We talked about it in committee, so this isn't to debate it again, but just to provide a different opinion. I would really call those estimates, and when something comes in over the estimate, it's above what you planned for. And that may require and should require us to take a look at planning where we are versus how much we have in that capital project plan. These particular items were at the top of that list. However, not at the bottom list. These aren't the 2022 and 2020 items, and these are there for a reason. The needs were considered particularly acute to provide for our female athletes. And, you know, I am supportive of it. I agree we need to keep an eye on that capital budget as it progresses, but for those reasons, I think it's a good vote, yes.
Is there any further discussion?
I'll just add that I am comfortable supporting this because of the logic that Dana laid out in our last Finance Committee meeting. And I might be a bit more lenient now than I will be in the future because this is our first one. So the plan that was estimated and laid out, we're just getting started in that plan. So just know that I'll support this, but we'll be a bit more discerning as we move through that plan. Because you can only take some money from Peter, give it to Paul so many times.
We can take all the money from Peter. I'm fine with that.
Eventually, Peter has nothing left in his pockets. Not that Peter.
Dana, one thing on that, to reiterate what Mark was talking about, can we go back in and from what we've learned from this first pass of projects that came out of that athletic field study and look at a re-estimate so we can budget moving forward, that 5 and 10 year budget plan?
I think, well, overall, you're going to end up with a new updated capital funding plan anyway. So one of the procedures that Mr. Zhang went through with each of our building principals this summer, he met with them. Some of them have different priorities. Some have different things that they want to shift in some of those future years. And again, one of the areas that we all need to discuss would be how comfortable do we feel with the estimates that we have in there for 18, 19, and some of those future years. So I think that will come out of that. But yes, we absolutely will go through that process, whether it be in buildings and grounds and or finance or both.
Yeah, I guess I would add to that. We have Mr. Pappas here from Eccles, but Dan Engen of VEBH was in charge of the project that led to the estimates. And certainly Mr. Pappas can speak for himself, but as that was discussed at committee, their initial estimate of the estimates was that it fell in line with what they would expect. So I think to some degree, it is art and science, and I don't know that we would move in a direction of, let's say, adding 3 to 5% arbitrarily, but we would really want to take a look, and particularly look at the next couple of years that are in, in the cycle. So again, I understand Mr. Stegman's perspective and all the board members who have spoken. We've had the opportunity to discuss as well. When we developed the capital funding plan in its entirety, it was understood there are not many school districts that have attempted a 10-year capital funding plan that is broad in coverage of infrastructure, technology, athletics, and other areas, but also is as granular as when is the expected warranty expire on a rooftop unit in a particular building down to the serial number. And when that capital funding plan was developed, it was with the intention that it was not going to be perfect within itself. There are things that are going to move out or in years based upon need or the life cycle of what's going on, but also that we consider a strategy to make some of the improvements to assets that we have and hopefully hold off or prevent the need for additional debt to pay for some of those projects. So again, I think for me, that's the balancing point. And as a strategy in the future, the potential to debundle, if that's a term, I'm not sure it is, but debundle items I think we're going to have to work through that with Buildings and Grounds Committee and get the recommendation of the architects. Their perspective during our committee meeting was bundling provides perhaps the greatest opportunity for lower cost because we have various contractors on site. It wasn't the case in this particular instance, but I would say in talking with Mrs. Kirk, we want to be somewhat cautious of this singleton event.
Can I add a couple items to that? Again, John Pappas from Apple's Mark Schiller's at a different meeting tonight, so I'm covering here. A comprehensive 10-year plan is something that is difficult with a certain amount of money. And we help districts do plans like that, not over that long a period of time, but those numbers really need to be evaluated every year. And I know that is part of the plan because prices of things do change and priority items change. And the bundling of it is important to be able to get the economy of scale with contractors and putting things together. There are ways to be able to bid those projects, though, if we think we're going to be up against the numbers, and establishing more alternate bids to allow for pricing on bid day, but then being able to add those alternate bids into the cost of the work if the budget can support it and it meets in line with what the priorities are certainly things that can be addressed and discussed for projects that will be coming up in the future.
Mrs. Kirk, for the record, what's the difference between the budgeted amount and the proposed amount of $1.249 million?
Unfortunately, I don't believe I have that off the top of my head, an exact number, but I believe it was approximately $300,000. And then there was a kind of a breakdown of how that would be accomplished basically through the capital reserve plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, I remember, for some reason I vaguely remember it being around $960,000 as a budget, somewhere around that. I guess I would say, in addition to the comments made, that if we were to rebid, even though bundling, the benefits of bundling and unbundling may have been overstated, rebidding, there seemed to be general agreement that was going to cost us considerably more. And I agree that is certainly problematic to try to anticipate costs over the course of 5 or 10 years, but the pattern of overages or underages will be important over the years. We've had some projects underbid, as well as this one under budget, as well as this one being over budget or over plan, as someone pointed out. Just that this one is a much higher dollar amount. So we'll be watching the pattern over the next couple of years as we progress through the capital funding plan. And lastly, I feel like I want to mention this when Mr. Kashani brought out robbing Peter to pay Paul, one of my favorite quotes of all time from George Bernard Shaw. The man who robs Peter to pay Paul can always count on the support of Paul. So, with that being said, are there any more comments or questions before we vote? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes. Yes. Opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Thank you all for your comments and input.
Item 5.02 is a motion to award the bid for the replacement bucket truck for the maintenance department to I-80 Equipment for the total amount of $51,500.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 5.03 continues that kind of motion, but a motion to approve the disposal of the 1994 Ford bucket truck to be sold on consignment for a desired sales price of $5,000 through I-80 Equipment in accordance with Policy 622.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
If we approve this motion for a consignment price of $5,000 and it comes in below $5,000, does that cause a problem? I'm looking for you. All right.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if it necessarily causes an issue in terms of board approval. Whenever you sell on consignment, that you do kind of understand that that's your target price, but it's not truly a set price. I do also believe that this vendor is considering using this as a trade-in value as well. So if they're unable to sell it through consignment, I believe that they will, and again, I haven't spoken to him yet, I will speak to him tomorrow morning, but he is considering using that value as a trade-in if the consignment would not go through.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 5.04 is an informational item on an update of the Buildings and Grounds summer project, and I will turn that over to Ms.
In terms of the summer projects listed, I won't go through each one or each building, but we did indicate an update for each project. If there are any specific questions that you have, please direct them towards me, and then I can discuss those with Mr. Zhang and get more concrete answers for you.
Thank you. Any further questions on Buildings and Grounds? Thank you, Mr. DiTullio. Ms. Kirk. Move on to Student Services. Mr. Stegman, would you mind taking this?
Sure. Motion to approve the 2017-2018 AIU Travel Instruction Services Letter of Agreement as attached.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Huswit, please excuse my ineptness, but I could not glean specifically what this is for.
This is our annual agreement with the intermediate unit. They provide travel instruction to our students with low incidence disabilities, and what that means is that they come out and provide in class and in the field training on how to access public transportation.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 6.02, motion to approve the SAT, ACT test prep classes provided through Goldstein Test Prep at no charge to the district for the 2017-2018 school year.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 6.03, motion to approve the attached 2017-2018 small games of chance resolution.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 6.04, motion to approve the student attendance and application of the student discipline code for the Pine-Richland High School Band to travel to Norfolk, Virginia to participate in the NATO Parade of Nations on Friday, April 27th, 2018.
Second.
Details described attached.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes.
Can I make one point on, sorry, 6.03, I was out of the room at the time of the approval. On the small games of chance, the boosters that are listed on that are the initial group that have submitted their documentation to the district per the policy. We would anticipate that there will be additional groups coming forward. That small games of chance would then have to be edited or updated through motion at the October 9th meeting. So just wanted to let you know that was not a comprehensive list. It is merely the groups that have been able to submit the information thus far. So, thank you.
Thank you. Item 6.05, motion to approve, motion to approve the 2017-2018 service agreement with UPMC, Western Psychiatric Institute, and clinic as attached.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes.
And item 6.06, just a reminder of the Student Services Committee meeting has been scheduled for October 9th, 2017 at 6 p.m.
Any further questions on student services? Thank you, Mr. Stegman.
You're welcome.
Staff services, Mr. Sundo, would you mind taking this?
Sure. Item 7.01, motion to approve the personnel and supplemental items as attached.
Second.
The item has moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes.
If I could just pause for a second. I just wanted to thank the board. We have tonight, through your action, you've hired Stephanie Scrinjar as the new high school assistant principal. She has been with us starting her 5th year, has really made an impact as transition counselor at Pine-Richland. That was a new position 4.5 years ago, and as she came into that position, it evolved and changed, and she was able to apply her leadership to that role. She's excited to take that next step as assistant principal. We're certainly proud that through a very rigorous process, we had an internal candidate clearly emerge as the top candidate for that position. We're excited about that. I did tell her to go home, not to wait for this item, just not knowing how long it would take us to get there. So thank you for that support, and we look forward to her beginning in that role. Thank you.
Item 7.02, motion to approve the student teacher as presented.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 7.03, motion to approve the staff attendance and application of Courtney Crock-Love, business education teacher, to participate in the Jumpstart National Educator Conference for Personal Finance from Friday, November 3rd to Sunday, November 5th in Washington, D.C., as described in the attached application.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Item 7.04 is an informational item. It is recognized that the following individuals have completed 3 years of satisfactory service at Pine-Richland in a professional position and have attained tenured status. Rachel Zespel and Sarah Hahn. Item 7.05 is discussion and information item having to do with the 100 policy programs batch.
If you don't mind, just a few comments. We have about 47 policies in this section. As you know, we've been working through the batch policy update. Over the last week or so, we've received comments or questions on about 25 of the policies. Now, many of them, I believe, can be responded to, answered relatively quickly. Some may lead to a little bit more discussion. Since we received some individual feedback in advance, we did take the time to try to organize some responses, and we're open to whatever process the board would like to use. If you want, we can start at the beginning and clip through with feedback, and then pause and discuss depending on where any member of the board would like to do that. And at any time, as per the process, if we want to pull it from the batch, we can pull it from the batch. It would then go to committee for more in-depth study. So if that game plan works, or is anyone opposed to that?
We don't have a policy committee, right? So what committee?
Staff services.
Okay.
Yeah, this is in the staff services section, and for many, many years, policies, unless there's something very specific that would, let's say, tie to finance when we're in that section, the committee that looks at it is staff services.
Okay, I would certainly support that the details are discussed and ultimately resolved in committee, in my position.
Do you mean for everything?
Any specific feedback per policy is resolved in committee.
I guess what I was getting at, there may be, I'll use an example, Policy 101, Comprehensive and Strategic Planning. There was a comment provided around the role of the board in that planning. The board still retains the right to, or the responsibility to approve our comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan and strategic plans are tied together. That is required to be publicly advertised and available, and the board ultimately takes action to approve that. Throughout the process, the board retains that role. What happens in our batch review is PSBA suggests some strike-through language of the existing policy. There are other places that we've added language to that. So I believe that if there's, hopefully my comment about the board retaining the right to approve and engage in that process would answer the singleton question that we had, which would allow us to keep it in the batch and not move to committee. So that, I guess that's my question to the board. Do we want to proceed that way as we have all the other batches, or?
Yeah, I mean, we're here, and we're not even an hour deep. I think we can maybe bang some low-hanging fruit out. Now, it may be that certain board members have questions that rise to, we want to kick it to committee. We actually have a pretty full slate of committee meetings all the way through this fall as well, and I wouldn't want to move some of those discussions out at this point, especially when I think about staff services and what we have on the committee meeting we just mentioned.
The sheer challenge here is the size of it.
Well,
So at some point, each comment would need, or should garner some attention, right?
no, not necessarily. We can discuss it. Let's see what those are. So I agree there's a lot of size. If we make 40 minutes progress, because we have 6 dedicated groups, we're going to make 40 minutes progress right now, let's make 40 minutes progress.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I don't think we can tackle it all. I would agree. Let's make some progress and maybe some easier lessons.
How about if we find out that there are some policies in which we seem to getting bogged down, we pull them for committee?
And I would agree that we very quickly say, we've gone on this for 5 minutes, that's a clear sign. Yeah, I would agree.
Can we agree on that principle? That if we can, okay with Mr. Stegman?
Yeah, I don't want to short shrift it. This is our primary.
No, that's not my intention.
That's all.
And it's not, the intention of, I can say mine and the senior leadership team is not to short shrift anything. In fact, it's to help be a part of a more cyclical review of policy so that they don't fall. I mean, that's all. And we can talk quickly, and if I would ask you, pause us if you want us to, otherwise we can just keep cranking through and address some questions. So, for example, 102 academic standards, there is an explicit statement that the term academic standards includes PA core where appropriate. There are not PA core standards for every content area. There are only PA core for some content areas. Otherwise, there's state academic standards, or there are local standards for particular departments. So that doesn't change anything. It's a regulatory requirement that is already in place. Owen, 104.
Sure. The question on 104, which is discrimination in employment and contract practices, the question was really around the role of the compliance officer and whether there's any term used, fox watching the hen house in those investigational processes. The compliance officer, as identified in that policy, is at the discretion of the superintendent or their designee. In the policy, the designee is myself, the Director of Human Resources and Legal Affairs. The role of the compliance officer is, when a complaint is issued, to make sure that the appropriate building level administrator initiates that investigation into the complaint. If the building level administrator is the subject of that complaint, then it comes upstream to me as the primary investigator for that investigation. If I am the one I'm the one being identified in the complaint process, that would kick upstream as well to Dr. Miller, because I would not have the ability to investigate a claim that directly implicated me in the claim. So that's the reporting process. Obviously, we need to have a designee. There's never ever a perfect system where the designee may not get entangled in something, but ultimately that gets pushed up the next level if a investigator is eliminated due to the conflict of the actual complaint.
And one of the questions, can language be considered where the board would be notified of a formal complaint?
Yeah, I have no problem with that, with the board being notified if a complaint of, and again, let's talk about this, is discrimination in employment and contract practices. So we discriminated against somebody in a hiring practice or something along those lines. I have no problem if a formal complaint is lodged, that the board has knowledge of that complaint being issued, and that we would have to follow our investigative process anyways, as far as trying to get the investigation done within 15 days and then a report issued and so on and so forth. So I have no problem with that at all.
Okay. Dr. P., 105?
105, there was a question or comment. Under the guidelines, there is a statement around educational opportunities for exceptionally identified gifted students, and there was a comment related to, is there something similar for special needs students? So under the guidelines of 105, number 4, it reads, a continuum of educational programs and services for all students with disabilities pursuant to law and regulation. So we believe that encompasses students with special needs.
In policy 105.1, there was a question about a clause, state laws allow parent guardians to review state assessment. That particular right of a parent to review a state assessment exists in law, and it's also addressed in policy 127 specifically. So parents do have that right, and parents also have the right to remove their child from, let's say, the PSSA or Keystone for religious reasons. We have a process to document that, but those rights continue to exist. Mike, you want to take the next one?
Did you say Owen or Mike?
Mike.
I'm sorry. 105.2, there was a question about exemption from instruction. You know, how is that achieved? And we don't see that happening very often in terms of, you know, students requesting to be exempt from something. Most often it's around a state assessment when there's that type of request. But it's really developed, the removal would be determined by a group. It's more of a collaborative effort where parents, teachers, principals, children would be involved in that conversation, and that's how it would be achieved and documented based upon the family situation, student situation, but it would definitely be a team effort in having that conversation.
Okay. 108, adoption of textbooks. There was a couple different comments on this one. So we do have a process for textbook adoption that we have followed. It includes a number, the AR, or the procedures we follow, include a number of steps. In the red line version, there's some formatting issues that showed up, but in the clean version, those formatting issues are not present, so that may have been one of the I'm not sure if that answered one of the questions. In terms of merging documents into an effective policy, that is a consideration that we could have. Our feeling at this point, again, would be to retain them where they are. Sometimes a smaller, shorter policy is clear to its purpose. Trying to combine what may seem like it fits can create monsters of policies that lose some of their focus. So our suggestion would be keep them as they are. Okay. Let's skip 109 because I think it would lead to some additional discussion for now. This may be one to consider pulling from the batch, but for library resources, again, whose authority? As it exists right now, librarians determine selection, and in terms of adding principal oversight, that's something that we could consider, and the outcome of that may be similar to the way we address 109 when we have that discussion.
So to be clear, I was referencing item 5 in the acquisition for the definition of authority. You're saying the librarian is the authoritative selector in this usage?
For library resources?
Yeah, 1091, yes.
The librarian selects resources for the library, that's correct.
Okay. Can we just say librarian, or?
Under delegation of responsibilities?
Sorry, an acquisition. So the criteria, it's the following criteria. So criteria number 5 reads authority in handling the subject. That would make the librarian universally authoritative on everything in that library.
No, I think it's referring to the authority of the source material in handling that subject.
Should we get the following criteria?
That's how I took it as well.
The authority of the material. So the reputation of the importance of the
Okay.
subject matter, the
Yeah.
authority of the subject matter, the reputation and standards of the publisher, the price of the material. I think it's the authority of the material.
Okay.
That's your-
That's correct.
Gotcha.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Cable television, Rachel?
So cable outlets like Consolidated and Armstrong provide, one of the questions we had in here was, can we take out the language that says advertising is prohibited? No. Cable outlets like Armstrong and Consolidated provide channels specifically for government and educational use, and Pine-Richland has been allotted airspace, which is known as PRTV, and this is designated for government and educational use. So as a result, we have to follow the guidelines for public television and the FCC rules, and basically paid advertising on public access channels are prohibited. However, programming on these channels can be underwritten. So there are specific guidelines for sponsorship. For example, like call to action statements are prohibited, and sponsors can only receive like a credit at the beginning or during closing. And it's just a little bit different, so you can't directly advertise on the space.
But you could pursue underwriting as an alternative revenue stream.
Yeah, but I think it's used to pay specifically for PRTV programming.
Right.
Yeah.
So where's this?
Pine-Richland High School graduation brought to you by Lenny's Beach
Yes.
Balls.
Exactly.
No, it's graduation underwritten by Lenny's Beach Balls.
Yeah.
It's
So,
like we
yeah,
used
there's
to
just a
NPR
little
remote.
bit different guidelines, but we can
But it could
definitely
be-
write that into.
It could be investigated
yeah.
for potential alternative revenue.
Yes.
Okay.
Please don't encourage that.
I didn't strike that from the...
We can encourage the
Talk to
revenue
Steve.
stream, not the...
Lenny's Beach Balls?
Okay. 110, instructional supplies, Dana?
There was a question that came up about students preparing useful items that they would be permitted to keep, that they would pay the district for the cost of these materials. I can tell you in my history at the district, this did happen more, probably in my first 5 years that I worked here. It is possible that if there was a project, so for instance, a family and consumer science project that's being done in the classroom, that students would pay a nominal fee toward the supplies, and then they would be able to keep that project when they were done. This is not something that we still continue to do, but this policy would allow for it if we chose to. And then just one other part with this policy is that it does indicate that an AR would need to be developed. It is something that we will need to do after the policy is approved in its third reading, and that would include more or less guidelines around what are considered personal and/or instructional supplies. So whether that be, in the athletic department or in the school buildings, there would be guidelines developed afterwards to kind of formalize that.
Okay. Policy 111, and we're almost halfway through those policies that had comments or questions. Lesson plans, suggestion, there's a word should, replace it with shall. Lesson plans are required. So it's a simple change based on the comment. Noel 113.1.
Question is the definition of weapon consistent with the definition of weapon in our weapons policy? And
Just a reminder, 113.1 is discipline of students with disabilities specifically.
so the answer is that the definition does differ. The definition of weapon in 113.1 is taken from the definition within the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So it's taken from the federal law. Definition of our policy comes from the Safe School Act of 1995, and the point within 113.1 is to outline, I think, the further protections that are available for students with disabilities.
So that there are further protections for students with disabilities.
Do they then need to be consistent? One way or the other?
No, I would
No.
say, generally speaking, even there, if there's an inconsistency, the federal law will trump, number one. Secondly, the carve-out or the exception is specifically identifying the issue of a student with special needs who may not have the comprehension or the understanding of their actions necessarily. As it relates to the general populace and the general student body, our policy is consistent with the Safe Schools Act as well as the Act of 1949. I can't remember which specific act off the top of my head. But it's absolutely consistent in law as to our definitions of weapon as it relates to regular education students and our definitions of weapon as it relates to special education students under IDEA. So I don't think there needs to be that because they're two separate populations, and those protections that are provided to the special education students or special needs students are not there or need to be afforded for the regular education population.
The fact that we're using the word weapon, though, in two different places to mean two different things. I mean,
lawyers do it all the time.
But you're looking at
So we specifically had a pretty interesting discussion on weapon, and then a policy followed above that, or a change on how we describe the word weapon. So.
Yeah, but I think when you look at that, you have to be able to apply that definition to the student population that you're dealing with at the time, and understanding the reason for the differentiation between those two policies being the special education component of that student and the potential needs of that student. So yes, they are different, but you have to understand the reason and rationale behind it is the understanding of the student at the time of the incident.
And there are other differences in the consequences assigned to students. So there are limitations in the days of exclusion from school for students with an IEP. There are determination hearings that have to occur to see if a particular incident was a manifestation of student disability. So there are a number of specific, unique requirements that connect to the manner in which discipline is managed for students with an IEP. 113.4, the confidentiality of special ed student information is very similar to general education students or policy in general. Again, there's just some additional protections that are required, and these specific policies are to help ensure that parents understand and have access for full participation in the IEP meeting. So nothing of real note here. For 114, gifted education, so there are caseload maximums, and then there are the roster. So the concept behind the maximums would be in a direct instructional setting, there's a roster limit of 20 students with the GIP for direct instruction if that's happening in certain ways. I would say the challenge in gifted education is it depends on the type of activity and what type of instruction is occurring. So for example, there could be a math class that happens to have 28 students in a class and 21 of the students happen to have a GIP, but the class doesn't exist for the purpose of the gifted IEP. It exists to deliver perhaps an accelerated math class in which just happens to have a roster size above the threshold. That was not the intention, but the intention is to, again, reasonably manage students with a GIP relative to the locations in which they get instruction. So practically, Eden Hall is probably the only place where it becomes relevant based on the way gifted services are currently delivered. At the primary levels, we just don't have the population within each of the primary schools. And as we get to the middle high school, the nature of programs and services change a little bit. So Eden Hall would be the one place that we can monitor and provide some additional feedback to the board. Okay. Owen, do you want to take 116?
Sure. 116 is a tutoring policy, somewhat of an odd policy in the way it reads. It starts out early in the policy talking about tutoring in what we would consider that traditional tutoring sense, that being a public school educated student who needs additional supports and therefore looks for some private tutoring to assist and supplement their educational program. So there's language around that, and that is what aligns most closely with our tutoring resolution that we have each year with our staff helping our students in the public education setting. There was a question number 1 about some language in there where it says the board recognizes that some students may require special help beyond the regular classroom program with, comma. Trying to change that to the board recognizes that an effective tutoring program can provide additional opportunities for students to enhance their educational experience. I think the 2 sentences are generally saying the same thing. The reason for the first sentence and the proposed language is that is directly out of the statutes that cover the issue of tutoring within the law. So it is verbatim out of the law as to how it is identified. That's why we were going with that language. And again, it may not be the most artful, but it is directly out of the law. The second part of that tutoring provision, though, then transitions out of our traditional thought of what tutoring is to support our public education students to a tutoring program that is a non-public and is the primary education program for the student. So those are 2 different sections. It's like I said, the policy is a little odd in the way it's structured, but the second part of that, where they talk about private tutoring, that's a term of art under the law indicating the student is not being educated in the public school, but is receiving their services from a tutor as their primary education delivery model. And all the language in that policy is verbatim out of the laws that cover those 2 areas of instructional tutoring. So,
Dr. P., can you take current events, 119?
Yeah, that's, again, that's one we didn't make a lot of changes to in terms of what was, we have from PSBA. So again, value we see in providing opportunities for staff and students to engage in topics related to current events, and we're just interested in any additional thoughts or comments from the board.
I guess I would ask, when we go down to authority, numbers 2 and 3, I sometimes hear that the presentations are not always balanced in certain classes. You know, obviously, this may be because there's a different point of view, different points of view throughout the community, but there are some constituents who feel sometimes that balanced presentations are not, do not exist in some of these classes. So I was wondering how you enforce such a policy. I mean, that seems a difficult policy to enforce given how people view certain current events. Because clearly if a teacher has a particular interest in that current event, it may be difficult for him or her to encourage a balanced presentation.
I would say there's 2 things. One would be ensuring clarity amongst the staff. The vast majority, not all, many current events tie to social studies, at times to science. Generally, those are the areas where current events are most frequent, I would say. So ensuring that those department members understand the expectations would be part 1. To your point of enforcement, candidly, it would likely come from a complaint. So we hear a concern that something was not balanced, and the administration has to investigate, and then based on that complaint, work through that issue with the teacher.
What's the genesis of this policy? Statute? The state demanded that we teach.
There's there's a tutoring provisions in the code which are ancient. They're along.
We're in current events.
Schools.
We moved on.
We're in current events, Pat.
119.
Oh, I was still
Current events. No.
boring through the thing here.
No, we're on current events 119.
I got it right here.
Mr. Stegman wanted to know.
Well, I guess.
No, this is not a mandatory
Not a
subject
statute
of
driven?
school code. No, not this one.
Any insight as to why this became a policy?
No, but I would argue for why it is relevant and important.
Right.
No need to argue that.
Okay, good. Then I would rather turn towards how do we manage and follow through with, ensuring that teachers are meeting the criteria that are outlined.
I'm not even sure I agree with number 2. I mean, it's okay to persuade students to a particular point of view. I hope that's going on every day in our buildings. I mean, obviously, the language is sort of indoctrinate, has that sort of heavy-handedness about it, but I sure hope my teachers are persuading my son of some things. I mean, as hard as it is to argue in practice, it's even harder to sort of debate this in theory, you know what I mean, Jeff?
Well, I would say that persuasion is almost inevitable, but balanced presentation helps mitigate the persuasive techniques. I mean, if somebody's going to say, this is the argument this way, this is the argument that way, this is how I feel, that's different than saying, this is what it is.
I like 3 and 4. I agree. I like 3 and 4 as sort of positive hallmarks of what it should look like, right?
But I guess I didn't write this policy. It's been here. Someone may have been concerned about indoctrination. If the presentations are not balanced, it can be viewed as indoctrination. And that violates the concept of scholarly inquiry, and I'm sure you would not be in favor of that.
Number 1 is critical because even an interesting and relevant current event outside of the scope of certification or teacher's responsibility is a recipe for a problem. So that's certainly important for us, that it's tightly aligned to the course they're teaching.
I think the instructional strategy and the approach the teacher uses can be helpful too. So if a debate type, pros and cons of both sides is used so that the class is actually weighing the issue, that could be helpful as well.
I guess one of the things I still remember, I remember taking my first humanities course in college, and my professor said to me, he goes, one of the things you have to learn in college is you have to write for your teacher. I was appalled by that. I said, well, what are you talking about? And I guess it's one of those things that's always sort of stuck with me. He said, that's how you get through. And I guess from my standpoint, I just want to ensure that that's not happening.
Yeah, I would suggest that their job is not to persuade, but to provide the facts and prove the point with the facts. Ultimately, the child decides.
Well, you can say that's a form of persuasion.
Yeah,
but it's not persuading.
The proof point on a current event, and I think we can all, we saw a current event happen this weekend very publicly in the NFL, and if you listen to the airwaves, everyone's persuading.
Sure.
And instead of just, here's the facts.
Right.
Here's this side, and leave it at that. Mm-hmm. And that's what I would hope that we would develop as part of the curriculum in those classes, and I can see in social studies, things like that, that's where that's going to happen. But I would say that if we only respond to complaints, okay, I can see an engaged high school student who's very into current events and very into politics say, okay, I don't agree with that, you're pushing this on me, and then they go have a discussion with the parents. But let's go to a 5th grader, 4th grader, 3rd grader, they're going to tend to get indoctrinated one way or another and never complain about it, right? And that may go directly against the parents' views, that may go directly against what we're saying we want to accomplish here. So I would hope that we would have a little bit more oversight of that, particularly at the younger levels, because I think at the older levels it tends to happen less. You know, I get the calls from the high school parents much more than I get a call from like a 5th grader's parents. So that's the concern I have with how do we do it, right? We say it, so what backs this? What backs that we are balancing the presentations?
I can tell you, I think one of the things we're focusing on is, and this goes as low as 4th grade, is evidence-based, both reading and writing. So it's teaching students not to take just this person's word for it or this one article that you read, but look for multiple sources and then make an informed either personal recommendation or understanding based upon your work, and use that evidence that you've learned from that work to make an informed decision or whatever your opinion is. So that's starting as, early in elementary school, they're receiving some of that level of instruction.
Yeah, I mean, that is starting, and I think I brought this example up once before, where they come home and they say, hey, Mom, what do you think about feminism? I'm like, what? why do you ask? Oh, I just wondered, like where do you just, it's not like a topic of conversation, you know? So then you have this discussion about feminism, and they don't really get feminism, and then they go, okay, thanks, and then you're like, well, why did you ask me that? Oh, I'm writing a paper, okay? And I just think that, so this evidence-based sort of thing, I think the concern I have is not so much in high school, but it is actually down in the lower levels where they have those little scholastic news things, which I was always dicing through, because it's written in a style that is just presenting certain sides of the argument, and it really isn't a balanced approach. So the scholastic news is actually more of my concern than the high school level, where they, I think, do eventually understand that. So I guess my input to this would be, if we're looking at the curriculum supporting materials and we're ensuring that it's not only scholastic news, then I think we're doing a fair and balanced job of doing that.
Okay.
So that's my input.
Okay. We've heard some feedback. Perhaps we can think about that, try to make revisions. We can ultimately pull this if the board wants to and take it to committee.
The committee meetings that we have coming up, do we have room for this particular one?
We can look, or we can schedule a staff services committee meeting on a different night. I mean,
Well, don't we have a joint?
We do, but we're pretty loaded in terms of agenda.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is, if we're pulling any of these from the batch, we're pulling them because they're going to require some time.
So, and I think more importantly in this one is not so much the policy, but is the administrative regulation
Agreed.
that goes with it.
Agreed.
So I mean, technically I'm fine with the way the policy is written, at least until I look at it again, but I think you need to have an administrative regulation that makes academic sense and really does put the student at the forefront of what you're trying to accomplish, which is their development, so.
Okay, so we will take that tact, leave the policy here, develop an AR. It won't be within the next week or so, but we will develop the AR, and we'll make sure specifically that it's developmentally appropriate and highlight some of the elementary versus secondary types of things that can occur.
Can I question, so we're developing an AR, I mean, to the extent I'm teaching a class, because I don't want to overkill this, because I've been on the board 6 years, occasionally I hear grumblings, but mostly they're grumblings and mumblings, and they're coming from both sides, which is fine. A lack of specificity, I hate debating shadows. I heard this, that, and the other thing, so which is what I'm debating here. There's nothing concrete that our sons and daughters are being indoctrinated, so I find it difficult to make arguments. But developing an AR for a teacher to have some 10-minute discussion related to the course's educational goals about a current event this weekend on the news seems a little much. I am interested about materials, Therese, so I am more interested in, and we do have a policy pulled on that.
109.
Yeah, I am interested about Scholastic and talking about the materials. The AR needs to be, I think it needs to be a light touch, because you're going to get into this area where it's regulating what happens in most classrooms to a certain extent all the time, right? Or on a semi-regular basis in a social studies or history classroom, and I want it to happen. I don't want it overly regulated. I don't think it typically rises to the level of, we're having materials. So I'd want to be careful that we don't stifle the spirit of scholarly inquiry because we just slapped an administrative regulation on.
Yeah. Well, I think I would support an AR, not because I think it's heavy-handed, but because we want educators to have the confidence to utilize current events.
Right.
And without clarity, there could be educators who are making a decision, I'm not sure if I can, therefore I won't, and so they're missing opportunities with their kids. So I truly believe an AR, and again, one that's developmentally appropriate, may help increase the relevant coverage of current events and give teachers the confidence to do that in an appropriate way. So.
Yeah, I agree with that, because that's really why I think it's important, because I think, and Peter, I think you would agree with the notion of the standardization, the consistency by which teachers approach it. And I think that my kids have always learned much from current events presented in the classroom. And in fact, I just wrote an email to a teacher thanking her for the way that she went about doing an assignment about a current event that was relevant and personalized for the student, to go out and interview some friends or family about a current event. So I think there's value in standardized, balanced approach. So, thank you. That's all I have to say.
I would wholly support debate being included or encouraged throughout, regardless of the grade.
Okay. All right. 121, there was a recommendation to remove the sentence, "The field trip is within the state of Pennsylvania." Now, this is under the section where it says, "The superintendent may grant final approval without board action for field trips that conform to the following, blah, blah, blah." Removal of Pennsylvania really would give me the authority to approve a single-day trip to Ohio, West Virginia. There's really not a lot of expanded authority with that, but that's what it would do. We could certainly consider removing that. Candidly, when kids are traveling out of state, I like the additional check and balance. It shouldn't happen often. They don't come often to the board for that reason. I would prefer to keep it, even though it limits my authority to approve. It just doesn't come to play so much, and I think it's a nice protection to have in there. It allows us to know when kids are leaving the state, we know, and there's some level of discussion. I feel that's appropriate. If the board wants to take it out, I could.
You lost me. How does removing it reduce the level of oversight?
It means the board is unaware when kids are traveling out of state. That section is about me approving without board action.
Does it matter to you guys?
I think his argument is sound. When you take a student or a child across state lines, there are other issues involved. I would agree with what he's saying.
Are they significant enough to eliminate the potential benefit, specifically, for instance, the STEM class going to the Lordstown Assembly Plan?
I think it's a matter of formality, making sure that there's extra precautions taking place when a student is taken across state lines.
If they want to go to the assembly plan, it's fine. It's just they submit it and it comes to the board. Board approves it. We move on. Yeah.
Couldn't we give pre-approval for certain states, i.e. Ohio, West Virginia? I mean,
You're going to have a hard time getting much further.
well,
Yeah, the first line covers it. Number 2 covers that, right? It's within one day.
That's why I'm fine with it as well, but whatever.
Okay.
Okay. 122 and 123 had the same basic comment. So I'll open this up and then Owen could perhaps step in. So administratively, we were suggesting eliminating language around the conduct occurs during time of students traveling to and from school. Our only reason for eliminating that is we felt it was duplicative of point number 4 in policy 122 and point number 3 in policy 123. So the same concept was included in multiple ways. It certainly doesn't hurt to leave it in, we just didn't feel like it was necessary since it was addressed in another area.
So there's a number of instances similar to some of the recommendations for combining other policies. In this case, being redundant might be more productive.
Well,
reinforcing the idea.
No, I'm making, the policies stay separate.
Right.
The point that was raised was the same. So again, the point is, if there is a nexus with inappropriate or illegal behavior, a nexus to the school activity, then we have the ability to enforce the student discipline code. So again, I just want to see, it was possible that a board member saw that being struck through and didn't see it written again later. I
think reinforcing it in this case is more valuable.
So leave it in twice.
I would vote leave it in.
Okay, it certainly doesn't hurt to do so that's fine.
I'm fine leaving it in twice. Then.
Okay, good enough. We will unstrike that in both of those policies. Mike, do you want to take 130?
On 122, if we could go back, the male-female athletic opportunities report on the last page.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that was 123.
123.
Yeah, so I missed that. There was a request, so there is an annual report now required of Mr. Shoup. He provides that report to the state. It's a Title IX compliance-based report on opportunities for male and female athletes. The policy indicates a lot of disclosure, including placing the report in a public website. We can add a sentence that says a copy will be provided to the board as well. So that happens on an annual basis in the fall. Mr. Shoup has to gather a whole spreadsheet worth of information. We have discussed that with the board at one time or another as we were thinking about activities that we had.
I think we looked at it a year or two ago. It's added to the annual. We'll begin to understand it better.
It's no problem. We can certainly provide that.
That'd be great.
Okay. 130, Mike?
Thanks. The homework policy, again, there's discussion of reasonableness remains in that policy that's highlighted a bit in that first major paragraph. Again, we're open for more feedback and discussion in terms of perspective. There was some comment around the homework shall be checked by the teacher. Does a group review class time? We said, considering some language change there, perhaps something like the homework shall be checked in or reviewed by the teacher as an expectation for receiving some level of feedback based upon the homework that was assigned. Sometimes it's very appropriate that it's to the level of one-to-one. Sometimes it's a group to review, and then a couple of those concerns that are voiced by students based upon their lack of understanding at that point. So I think there's definitely some flexibility we can look at there with that language. There was a comment about posting, a policy for posting assignments that's developed by a building administrator and then used consistently across classrooms. I took that as, we're all going to use a website or our teacher landing page to just post our homework assignments, and that expectation would be across all classrooms. That's something I thought, we want to talk with PREA, because that's setting an expectation for how we communicate homework class by class. I'm not sure that's what the intention was in that comment, so just open for discussion.
Yeah, and I'll own that one. And it comes up at a good time because it is sort of ties in with conversations I've had with Sean as we look, and I know we're going to reflect on the implementation of Google Classroom, et cetera. But really seeing the homework policy here now, I think it may be an opportunity, and obviously, yes, discussions with PREA about any expectation, but my observations even prior to the implementation of Google Classroom, and my observations as a parent in the lower grades, but what I hear in other grades as well, is there is a fair degree of inconsistency, even within a grade or within a building, about how assignments are posted. Maybe at a higher grade, I'd say there's a variety of implementation or teacher styles, but a lower grade, when it's, second, third, or fourth grade, I'm going to call it inconsistency. Where is the homework written down? Where is this child supposed to write it down? And that is a challenge. Maybe it's a challenge, because we have parents in a district where the parents are going to check the kids' homework through 6th grade. That's a strength. That's parents helping the teachers do their job. So I think we should, make the teachers, we shouldn't have to make them, but they should do it, right? Help the teachers, help the parents. And if I, as a parent, don't know what my 4th grader's homework is, then I can't check their homework. Not only can't I check it, I can't even check it for completion because I don't know if it's complete. There are a variety of ways to solve that. In this day and age, it couldn't be easier. It couldn't be easier with Google Classroom or Blackboard, or, I'm proposing language that is platform neutral. But I'm proposing that it be very clear in the policy of this board and a statement to the teachers, and we don't make many of them, but I'm willing to make one with this one, that I expect very clear in policy you to communicate homework assignments to children who are 11 years and younger, and that the parents have the opportunity to see it, and that's saying, hey, well, I told your child, but you never had the opportunity to check or be involved in that process. I don't think technologically there's any reason for that now, right? We know we can accomplish this, so why not do it? On a practical basis, we're moving in that direction with these technologies. We know we provide these tools. We're saying we want it. But think about the situation you're in if enforcement doesn't exist or implementation is spotty. So 90% of the assignments are on Google Classroom, right? 7 out of 8 science teachers are posting the assignments on Google Classroom. One's putting it on the Blackboard, and sometimes I'll put it on Classroom, but you need to check the Blackboard. You've gotten, right? So if you're 90% of the technology is taken up by the workforce, you actually end up with like 40% of the benefit, because in the end, you still don't know if all your assignments are in one place. And there's nothing that says right now in policy, well, this is your expectation. This is part of the job expectation. So we negotiate really soft stuff, but here's something I think is very concrete and specific, and I wouldn't want it to be vague with union. I would want it to be communicated with them, but I'd want to be clear. You know, as a board, as a community, we have the right to set expectations, what we expect. The feedback I get consistently from the parents and community who pay the teacher salaries is, why can't we make sure the teachers put the assignments all in one place? Very simple, very clear. There may be some devil in the details, and I had made suggestions, you know, if we're not there with Google Classroom at all the elementary buildings, we want to be platform independent. You know, implementation might be 2019, not even 2018. But I see no reason why I couldn't set this expectation. I think if I said this expectation in a meeting, in academic achievement, without policy, universally everyone would agree with me. So let's put it in policy. That's how I felt.
See, I don't know. I think this kind of goes down to AR again. I personally had a lot of success with teachers in the lower grades using the platform of the websites, you know, and there were a few teachers that did not use their websites. I thought the value from the student standpoint was that they actually had to take responsibility to get their hand and use it to write down the assignments, you know, and it was them taking responsibility for writing down what they needed to accomplish. Do they grow into, you know, electronic, you know, Blackboard? Yes, and they usually transition very well. But there is something magical about the fact that the teacher is forcing this hand and this brain to connect to a piece of paper to be responsible. I have never checked my kids' like elementary homework unless they asked me to. Like because they wrote it down and I said, do you have your homework? And they would say yes, and they did it. If they would say, like, I'm struggling with this, could you look it over? Sure. So I don't know that I want to embed it in policy as much as I want to say that there is an expectation that parents are aware of, you know, what their homework assignment is maybe. But again, that goes down to AR. Like, these are the technology tools we have for parents. This is what the expectation level is, you know. I don't know. That's one of those.
Just in listening so far, I would say we pull this one from the batch, because I do think there are some developmental discussions we want to have.
Yeah.
I get the point of being clear about the destination, not the vehicle to get there, which is what I hear you saying. And I think there may be some value to that, but I think it would, not to make a big, I think it matters enough to have some more detailed understanding about what's going on in our schools. So I would say we pull this one.
Okay.
Okay, 137, and this may be homebound instruction and home education programs are two different concepts, and I think sometimes there can be some overlap between them. Home education, homeschooling, that is the program. There are certain requirements that families have and they must comply with, and we have oversight of that occurring. Homebound instruction deals with some temporary form of injury or reason, and as prescribed by a physician, child cannot attend school, and therefore it's shorter in duration, and we provide certain hours of instruction in the home during that time of homebound. So I'm hoping there's really not a change here based on the policies that we're reviewing. It just aligns with the regulations.
There was one other question in there about the prior policy we, as a district, did not have an obligation to issue a diploma to a homeschooled student. There's language in there in the new policy that talks about that a supervisor of the student or a, quote, appropriate diploma granting organization will do it. That appropriate diploma granting organization does not mean the public school district. That is, if you read the law and the language of that statute, it's talking about a external agency which has to go through a process, and the state can issue and say, you are a diploma granting agency that would be appropriate to issue a diploma to a student. So do not take the appropriate diploma granting organization as conferring on the district an obligation to issue that diploma for the homeschooled student.
I was confused by that.
Yeah.
Came up, why we wouldn't confer a diploma if they did not meet the requirements, but they could at some point in time meet the requirements and get what was known as a GED. What else, what other case, give me a case in point where someone else is conferring a diploma on them?
So,
for our, I am assuming for our, showing that they met our requirements, or is that not the case?
it's not real, it's really, they are meeting the criteria established in the law that allows them to run a homeschooled program, which are not necessarily aligned to the Pine-Richland School District program of studies.
Yeah.
So it's an independent, outside of Pine-Richland process.
So why is that why would it be part of language of a policy of ours?
It's just within the code that talks about who's going to confer a diploma upon a homeschooled student, and it's just clarifying that it's either the supervisor of that program, meaning the parent or some other individual who's made the application for the student to have the homeschooled program, or this state-approved diploma granting institution that is not us, but some external agency that the state has said, yes, you can confer diplomas upon students if they meet the criteria under the code.
Thank you.
Yep.
The 140 charter schools, it's just the nature of the law. We do not have a brick and mortar charter school within the Pine-Richland borders, and in the event that someone wanted to do that, the policy reflects sort of the process. Why would anyone in public education approve a brick and mortar charter school? I can't answer that question, because every community is different. And in some cases, they may be denied by the local school board, and there's an appeal process for that. So again, for our purposes, it establishes the policy which complies with the law. It's our position we would want to keep. There's a question about, can we combine some policies? Homebound, homeschool, charter school, they're all unique, and we would prefer to keep them as separate and clear as we can and not commingle those for any reason. Standards for persistently dangerous schools, 143. I mean, this does not apply to Pine-Richland at this time. The question was, does not identify the board. There's a threshold that could be reached, and if the threshold is reached, it provides options for families. Again, not relevant at this time. I don't know that it requires additional.
Then why don't we just pull them?
Pull the policy?
Throw them out, rather, take them off the books.
The policy?
Yeah. These three were written oddly in that they don't show ownership by the board, the district. They start with the Pennsylvania Department of Education is required.
What's the third one? I know 143, 144.
And I guess it just...
Two, okay.
Those two. They were just odd the way they were presented, and ultimately we didn't own them. So if we don't own them, why have them?
All right. Let us look.
That's the point.
Let us look into that.
That was
Okay.
the point.
All right. And then student services, this is a component of the PDE comp plan. The next time that our student services plan is due is November 19th, 2019.
2019.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So we've pulled 109. We didn't discuss 109, but it has a lot in it about resource materials and practicality. We pulled 130. We're looking at an AR for 119. And I think for the others, we can take a crack at some of the feedback and keep it within the batch if that works for the board. Okay, thank you.
I just had one general question for answer to be tonight or at a later date, but how do we verify completion of our duties per policy? How do we audit the implementation of policy? We write them, we approve them, they're in there.
Well, I think so I'll give you we have many policies. Some policies had been in place since 1994,
Right.
and I don't know if anybody had read them in 20 years. And that's not a criticism, that's
it should be a criticism.
Well,
right.
So we're moving towards reviewing and updating language. I think that we could certainly take direction from the board or committees as to specifically which areas are important and align with the mission and vision of the district, and put attention or energy into what performance indicators or what metrics or what checks and balances occur in terms of reviewing them. So we can...
I don't think it comes from the administration.
No, I know it doesn't. I said we'll do what the board,
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. That's for the board to determine, discuss, and find some practical way. I would assume you want it to be practical, feasible, et cetera.
Absolutely.
And so our perspective sometimes helps with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's my point.
I just wanted to chime in on a lot of them that are state or federal prescribed duties of the board or the district as entity. You do get audited by a state auditor, okay, you get audited by your private auditor on all those financial things, and the sort of shadow of those things about procurement processes. That'll happen with the state auditor. You get, for instance, the state special ed compliance audits. There's a lot of auditing of things on an ad hoc basis, but I don't know that anybody has...
Special ed plan, the whole comp plan, it's all of our academic services.
Here's a list of all the audits that poke at different places in the policy structure. But there's a lot there. Now, it might be worthwhile to look and say, are there some that nobody ever looks at?
I would naively think that it would follow private sector and that there's an audit process that ultimately over a period of X years, you've touched every shall or every section anyway to ensure that on a general level that the policies are being followed.
We'll wait for direction.
Okay, item 7.06, an informational item, a review of, we had a staff services meeting prior to this board meeting. It consisted entirely of a presentation by Owen Kenny, so I'm going to boot it to Owen to give us a brief summary of that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Sundo. We went through a number of topics that are identified in the agenda, went through the strengthening and an update on our current hiring processes and improvements that we have made to those systems, as well as our onboarding and orientation processes for new employees, which not only includes a strengthened and updated induction program which was addressed earlier in this meeting, but also additional trainings for paraprofessionals and the better onboarding of staff at the building level, orientation level as well. We did, again, talk about the Pine-Richland Academy, which is replacing our prior induction program, which was discussed earlier in this meeting. We gave an update on the substitute staffing levels, which currently have a fill rate of around 93% for the beginning of September, and moving forward with our strategies to try and improve the quality of substitute staffing in the classroom when the regular teacher is vacant, to make sure that learning is still going on. And then finally, touching on PA-ETEP, which is the district's new technology for evaluations across all work groups in the district, whether that be teachers, support staff, administration, or the like, and the rolling out of that technology to the staff, which is underway currently, and hopefully will be a positive tool as we go forward, but still wanting to make sure we're focusing on feedback and appropriate evaluation for all employees across all groups, to make sure that feedback is actionable and that the evaluation is meaningful throughout that process.
Any further questions on staff services? Thank you all for your participation. Operational services, Mr. Lyons.
Thank you. Item 8.01 is a motion to approve the purchase of 140 additional Chromebooks in the amount of $30,520, and 5 cards with Google device licenses in the amount of $7,995.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Item 9.01, election of PSBA officers. We don't have any names filled. If anybody wants to offer a name.
I'll make a motion, Jeff.
Go ahead.
And if it's seconded, I'll discuss it. So I would make a motion, let me get the right language. Motion to elect the following individuals to serve as officers for PSBA: David Hutchinson as president-elect, Eric Wolfgang as vice president, and Daniel O'Keefe as Western at-large representative.
No treasurer.
Did I skip?
Yeah, we need a treasurer, too.
Treasurer is not a competitive election either, right?
No.
That's,
Just Mike.
I'm not even sure that a regional one is it?
no, the regional one isn't. Mike Gossert as treasurer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Reminder, what was the
I
deadline?
apologize.
October 12th.
I move that we then table this for maybe a write-in vote or what have you this time to review the recommended selections.
Technically, there's no motion to table yet. I don't think I've been seconded.
He hasn't.
I was listening.
Dead silence will get you there quicker.
Wasn't going to interrupt discussion on that.
Okay, we have a second. I would just say I prefer the vignette from Otto Voigt, so I would vote for him personally over David Hutchinson. I agree with the Eric Wolfgang.
So I'll share I did reach out to Daniel O'Keefe, who is the only representative or candidate for the Western at Large, and is on the AIU board. We missed each other at a couple meetings, so had the chance to have a conversation. Mr. Hutchinson, as is Mr. Voigt, is recommended by the Leadership Committee. Mr. Wolfgang is the recommendation of the Leadership Committee for Vice President. The other candidate is not. However, he did share that they would all make great officers, so there's really no bad answer there. But that he has worked with Mr. Hutchinson and Mr. Wolfgang, who have more experience maybe than the other candidates. So that's where I'm at. But I think the good news is there really aren't any bad answers, nor did he identify any particular ideological schism or leaning or framing in the candidates. So I'm happy to support any motion.
Is there any further discussion on Mr. Lyons' motion?
I mean, I would also agree with Mr. Voigt.
Do you want to parse your motion, Mr. Lyons, or do you want to keep it?
I like Steve's motion, but I don't think it's on.
It's not on yet.
Yeah. We're
still discussing Mr. Lyons' motion. I guess you could table it if you want.
Yeah, I mean,
we can vote on the table if you want.
And how many there are, do we have an even number? Do we have 7 tonight? So, I'll amend my motion to read simply a motion to elect David Hutchinson for the casting of vote for David Hutchinson as president.
That's what you had, yep.
No.
Well, he had a
that was my
motion of three candidates on his motion, so I asked him if you wanted to parse
If we
it.
want to be formal, I'll say amended. I'm just going to take it back. I made it all 3 to see if we can get one quick one. If we can't, then let's just go through and we'll hold.
You can treat that as amended by consent.
Is everyone okay if I amend my motion to be just the president?
Okay.
And, we can put Hutchinson first, but if that doesn't work, I hope somebody will move for Voigt.
Okay, so we have a second on the amended motion.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion?
So I move that the amended motion be tabled until such time a proper review can be held. And if that timeline of October 12th is prior to the next opportunity to vote as a board, we adopt some mail-in process where by email we submit our votes to the secretary. she tallies and lets us know what happens.
We can't vote that way.
No,
We
you
have to
can't.
vote in a public meeting, so.
You'll
and we-
have to
This has
vote
been on our
on-
agenda for a month and a half, that's why.
You'll have to vote on the
table motion, Greg?
I'm sorry.
Did you second the table motion?
Well, I tried to, but I didn't know if it was
It's back up.
I second that.
Now you gotta
Now we
vote.
have to vote on the table motion. All those in favor of the table motion say yes.
Yes.
Opposed?
No.
No.
All right. We better have a roll call. on that. Ms. Williams,
Okay.
this is the motion to table now. Table Mr. Lyons' motion for Mr. Hutchinson.
This is for Mr. Lyons's, okay, so.
This is for the tabling.
This
This
is
is
a
for
motion
the
to
table.
table.
Okay, all right,
To table
good.
his motion.
Dr. Banyas,
No.
Mr. Kashani,
No.
Mrs. Dawson,
Yes.
Mr. Stegman,
Yes.
Mr. Lyons,
No.
Mr. DiTullio,
Yes.
Mr. Sunda.
No.
Motion fails. Okay,
Back to the motion.
back to the motion. Any further discussion on the submission of Mr. Hutchinson for president? Let's have another roll call vote, Ms. Williams.
Okay,
This is now the vote for
for just,
David Hutchinson as our vote for president-elect.
okay. Mr. Sunda,
Yes.
Dr. Banyas,
No.
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Stegman,
No.
Ms. Dawson,
No.
Mr. Kashani,
No.
Mr. DiTullio.
No. Motion fails. Do you have any other motions? You want to make another motion?
I'll make a motion to, that we cast a ballot for Otto W. Voigt III for president of PSBA.
Second.
Motion, the item has been moved and second. Is there any discussion on the motion for Otto Voigt for president-elect? Let's have another roll call vote, Ms. Williams.
Mr. DiTullio,
Yes.
Mr. Stegman,
No.
Mr. Kashani,
Yes.
Ms. Dawson,
Yes.
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. Sunda,
Yes.
Dr. Banyas.
Yes. Motion passes.
Motion passes.
Well, congratulations, Autumn.
All right.
If it please the chair, may I make a motion that we cast a ballot for Eric Wolfgang as, I think Eric Wolfgang as vice president. I'll keep it separate.
We have
That's
a
it.
second?
Second.
Second.
The item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, Ms. Williams, let's roll call vote.
Mr. Stegman,
No.
Mr. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. DiTullio,
Yes.
Dr. Banyas,
Yes.
Mr. Sunda,
Yes.
Ms. Dawson,
No.
and Mr. Kashani.
Yes.
Passes.
Motion passed. You have everything? Okay. All right. Now, are the other ones competitive? Is that?
No, if I may make a motion that we cast a ballot for Mike Gossert as treasurer and Mr. Daniel O'Keefe for Western at-large representative.
Second.
Item has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I think we can have and
Voice vote.
on this one. All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion passed.
I will give a shout out to Daniel O'Keefe. I don't know if you've met him. Therese, you may have. It's a thankless job, like most of our jobs here. It takes a lot of time and energy, and so I'm happy to serve with him in the AU, and I'm glad that he will serve for us in PSBA again this term.
Yeah, but I've known Mr. O'Keefe from the Beatty board. He's a tireless worker. I don't know how he finds the time to do all he does.
That takes a lot of time, that job. I know it seems like nothing, but it does.
Well, thank you all for doing that. Item 9.02, election of trustees to PSBA Insurance Trust.
these are non-competitive, as I understand. So the recommended action is a motion to elect Michael Fontanetto and Marion Neal as trustees for the board of the PSBA Insurance Trust.
Second.
The item has moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Reports. Time for our second recognition of visitors. Anybody wishes to approach the board, please do so.